The fluorescent lights of the Oakwood Estates community clubhouse hummed with a sterile indifference, casting a pallid glow on the 24 homeowners seated in rows of folding chairs. At the front of the room, Frank Morrison stood at a cheap laminate lectern, his knuckles white where he gripped its edges. He was a man built of quiet angles and military discipline, but his voice, when he spoke, was softened by a grief that was only 8 months old. "My name is Frank Morrison, 1214 Chestnut Lane," he began, his tone respectful but firm. "I'm here this evening regarding the matter of my late wife's memorial garden." He paused, letting his eyes scan the 5-person board of directors seated at a long table before him. 4 of them looked bored, their expressions ranging from mild impatience to outright fatigue. The 5th, Board President Karen Mitchell, watched him with the focused, unblinking intensity of a hawk studying its prey. She was immaculate, her blonde bob perfectly sculpted, her navy blazer radiating an aura of crisp, unassailable authority. "As you know," Frank continued, "my wife, Martha, passed away in February. The garden, specifically the small rosebed and the stone retaining wall along the east side of our property, was the last project we worked on together. It is. It is more than just landscaping to me. It is a living memorial. I believe it is tastefully done, violates no one's line of sight, and improves the aesthetic of the neighborhood." Karen offered a smile that did not reach her eyes. It was a thin, precise gesture, a weapon disguised as courtesy. "Thank you for your heartfelt comments, Mr. Morrison. We all extend our deepest sympathies for your loss." Martha was a lovely woman. She consulted a stack of papers in front of her. "However, the issue at hand is not sentiment, but compliance with the association's governing documents. The Architectural Review Committee has flagged the unapproved retaining wall as a potential encroachment on a common area view corridor easement." Frank's brow furrowed. "A view corridor? There is nothing to see on that side of my property but the back of the miller's fence. The wall is less than 18 inches high." "Nevertheless," Karen said, her voice a silken whip of procedure, "the CC&Rs are quite clear. Any structural modification on a homeowner's lot requires prior written approval from the ARC. Furthermore, any encroachment onto common areas, regardless of height, is strictly prohibited. We must apply the rules consistently to all residents, or they cease to have meaning." She glanced at the clock on the wall. "Mr. Morrison, the open forum portion of our agenda allows each resident 3 minutes to speak. Your time is up." The finality in her tone was a gavel strike. A faint flush of heat crept up Frank's neck. He had come here to make a reasonable, human appeal, expecting a measure of compassion. Instead, he was being dismissed with the cold, impersonal machinery of bureaucracy. He looked out at his neighbors. A few offered sympathetic glances, but most stared at the floor, unwilling to be drawn into a conflict with the board. This was the silent pact of suburbia. Keep your head down, your lawn mowed, and never, ever cross the HOA. "Thank you for your time," Frank said. His voice clipped. He retreated from the lectern and walked back to his seat, the sound of his own footsteps echoing in the sudden, uncomfortable silence. The humiliation was a physical weight in his chest. Karen Mitchell had not just denied his request. She had made him feel small, his grief an irrelevant nuisance in the face of her orderly, rule-bound world. As she tapped her gavel and moved on to the next agenda item, a lengthy debate over the approved shades of beige for mailbox posts, Frank knew this was not over. This was a declaration of war, fought not with armies, but with bylaws and violation notices. The next morning, Frank was on his knees in the damp soil of the memorial garden, the scent of earth and roses a comforting balm. He gently pruned a climbing rose. Its delicate pink blossoms, a perfect echo of the color Martha's cheeks would turn when she laughed. Every stone in the low, curving retaining wall had been placed by his own hands, with Martha directing him from her lawn chair during her final good weeks. A little to the left. Soldier, she would command with a weak but playful smile. That one's crooked. We're building a legacy, not a bunker. Now, the wall was a fortress of memory. He ran a hand over the cool, rough surface of a river stone, his throat tightening. To Karen Mitchell. It was an unapproved structural modification. To him, it was the last conversation he and Martha ever had. A voice from behind startled him. Looks like you could use some reinforcements. Frank turned to see Sarah Jenkins, his next-door neighbor, holding a foil-covered casserole dish. She was a decade younger than him, a high school history teacher with a quick smile and a healthy skepticism for authority. "Brought you some lasagna," she said, setting the dish on the porch steps. "My mom's recipe. It's been known to win hearts and settle diplomatic disputes." She gestured with her chin toward the garden. "I heard about the meeting last night. Don't let her get to you. Frank, Karen Mitchell runs the HOA like it's her personal fiefdom." Frank sighed, rising to his feet and wiping his hands on his jeans. She called it an encroachment on a view corridor easement. "Sarah, you've lived here for 15 years. Have you ever heard that term before?" Sarah snorted. "Only when Karen wants something. Look, you need to understand what's really going on. She's been pushing for community improvement projects for years. Talks about attracting a high-end commercial developer to the empty lot at the end of the subdivision. She thinks it will increase our property values. Most of us think it will just increase traffic and noise." Frank looked down the street toward the overgrown field that bordered the neighborhood. "What does that have to do with Martha's garden?" "I don't know. Exactly," Sarah admitted. "But with Karen, nothing is ever what it seems. She's all smiles and procedure on the surface. But underneath, she's playing a long game. She has political ambitions, wants to run for city council one day. Oakwood Estates is her proving ground. Just be careful. She doesn't fight fair." Frank thanked her for the lasagna and the warning. As he watched her walk back to her house, he felt a familiar unease settle over him, the kind of battlefield instinct that had kept him alive for 3 tours. He was being targeted, but the objective was still unclear. He spent the rest of the day tending to the garden, the simple, physical work, a way to organize his thoughts. He reread his thick binder of HOA governing documents, the covenants, conditions and restrictions, the bylaws, the architectural design guidelines. He found the sections on structural modifications and common areas. The language was dense, intentionally vague, and open to interpretation. It was the perfect weapon for someone who knew how to wield it. He was a man who respected rules and followed procedure. He had commanded men in situations where a single misunderstood order could have devastating consequences. But this was a different kind of warfare, one of insinuation and bureaucratic maneuvering. He was out of his depth, a soldier on an unfamiliar terrain, and the enemy was already probing his defenses. The first official salvo arrived 4 days later. It wasn't a friendly letter. It was delivered by certified mail. A green slip left in his mailbox that required him to go to the post office and sign for it. A deliberately intimidating and official act. The envelope bore the letterhead of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association, managed by Prestige Community Management. Inside, the single sheet of paper was cold and formal. Formal notice of violation. Date: October 15th, 2023. Property: 1214 Chestnut Lane. Certified mail, SAW, 7018 0360 002 1459 8821 Swash. Dear Mr. Morrison, this letter serves as a formal notice of a violation of the Oakwood Estates covenants, conditions and restrictions (CC&Rs). An inspection conducted on October 14, 2023 has confirmed a continuing violation on your property. Violation. CC&R Article 8. Section 8.4.2. Common Area Encroachments. An unapproved retaining wall structure has been constructed on a designated Common Area View Corridor easement. Required action. You are required to remove the unapproved structure in its entirety and restore the area to its original condition within 14 days of the date of this notice. Consequences of non-compliance. Failure to cure this violation by the deadline will result in the levying of fines and the scheduling of a formal hearing before the Board of Directors, as outlined in the Association's bylaws. Sincerely, the Oakwood Estates Board of Directors. Frank read the letter 3 times. The words continuing violation and failure to cure were designed to sound menacing, as if he were a public health hazard. The citation of a specific clause, Paragraph 8.4.2, gave it the veneer of irrefutable legal authority. This was no longer a disagreement. It was a formal accusation. He held the crisp paper in his hand, the black ink a stark contrast against the white. The threat was no longer theoretical. It was documented, dated, and delivered with the full, impersonal force of the association. The battle for Martha's Garden had officially begun. The hearing was a masterclass in procedural theater. It was held not in the open forum of a regular board meeting, but in a small, windowless office at the headquarters of Prestige Community Management. The room felt designed to intimidate, with its oversized mahogany table and the faint, chemical smell of air freshener failing to mask the scent of stale coffee. Frank sat on one side of the table. On the other sat Karen and 2 of her loyal board members, a grim-faced trio of judges who had clearly reached their verdict long before the proceedings began. A representative from the management company, a young man named Tim, who looked profoundly uncomfortable, sat at the head of the table, taking minutes. Thank you for attending. Mr. Morrison, Karen began, her tone radiating a practiced, condescending patience. This is a formal hearing regarding the violation cited in our notice of October 15th. You are here today to present any evidence or testimony as to why the board should not find you in violation of CC&R 8.42. Frank took a deep breath, determined to remain calm and professional. He had prepared his case methodically, just as he would have prepared a mission briefing. He slid a folder across the table. I have several photographs of the garden wall, he stated. As you can see, it is less than 18 inches high and is constructed of natural river stone that matches the approved aesthetic of the neighborhood. It is set back more than 15 feet from the sidewalk. It obstructs no view whatsoever. Karen glanced at the photos for a fraction of a second before pushing them aside. The aesthetic quality of the wall is not the issue, Mr. Morrison. The issue is its location. She unrolled a document and spread it on the table. It was a blurry, grainy photocopy of what looked like a site plan, marked with thick, indistinct lines. This is the community map provided to the board by the original developer. As you can clearly see, she tapped a smudged area with a perfectly manicured finger. Your property line ends here. The area where the wall is constructed falls within this shaded region, which is designated as a common area easement. Frank leaned forward, squinting at the map. It was almost illegible, a relic from a decades-old copy machine. With all due respect, Ms. Mitchell, that map is not a legal survey. It looks more like a marketing blueprint. My property survey, which I received when I purchased the home, shows my lot line extending another 5 feet. The wall is well within my private property. Are you presenting this survey as evidence? Karen asked. Her eyebrow arched. I didn't bring it with me, Frank admitted. I didn't realize I would need to prove my own property lines against a blurry photocopy. It was a mistake, and he knew it the moment the words left his mouth. He had come prepared for a discussion, not a trial. Then the only evidence before the board is the map we have on file, Karen said smoothly, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. And this map indicates a clear encroachment. She folded her hands. Do you have anything further to add? The question was a formality. The hearing was a sham. A kangaroo court convened to legitimize a foregone conclusion. Frank felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp. But he forced it down. Losing his temper would only play into their hands, allowing them to paint him as an unstable, aggressive old man. Yes, he said, his voice low and steady. I would like to state for the record that I believe I am being unfairly targeted. This action feels punitive and disproportionate, and I formally request that the board provide a clear, legally binding survey map to justify its claim before taking any further action. Karen smiled her thin, reptilian smile. Your request is noted in the minutes. Thank you for your time. Mr. Morrison, the board will deliberate, and you will receive our decision in writing within 5 business days. The decision arrived in 3. Another certified letter. The board had found him in violation. A fine of $50 per day was being levied, retroactive to the date of the original violation notice. The total amount due was already $1,250. The letter concluded with a chilling sentence. Unpaid fines and legal fees may result in the placement of a lien on your property. The fine wasn't the point. It was the principle. They were using the weight of the association to crush him, to make it so financially painful to fight back that he would have no choice but to surrender. He sat at his kitchen table, the 2 violation letters side by side, a paper trail of escalating aggression. He could tear down the wall, destroy the last thing he and Martha had built together, or he could fight. But he couldn't fight alone. He was a soldier, trained for direct conflict. This was a war of paperwork and legal loopholes. He needed an expert, someone who knew how to navigate this terrain. He needed to find the truth, buried somewhere in the bureaucratic labyrinth of deeds, bylaws, and county records. He was no longer just defending a garden. He was defending himself against a fraudulent claim, and he would not back down. Frank realized he was being systematically dismantled, not by a frontal assault, but by 1,000 paper cuts. Each letter, each procedural ruling, was designed to drain his resources and his will to fight. Sarah, seeing the exhaustion etched on his face, insisted on action. You need Mr. Chen, she said over coffee at his kitchen table. He lives over on Maple Avenue, retired from the county recorder's office after 40 years. He knows every plat map, every easement, every zoning variance filed in this county since the Truman administration. If anyone can find the real map, it's him. Mr. Chen was a small, meticulous man with wire-rimmed glasses and a quiet, almost serene demeanor. He listened to Frank's story in his study, a room lined not with books, but with rolled-up blueprints and survey maps neatly organized in cubbyholes. He examined the HOA's blurry map and the violation notices, his expression unreadable. This is a developer's conceptual drawing, not a legal plat, he said finally, his voice soft but precise. It has no legal authority. The HOA is either incompetent or acting in bad faith? Likely the latter. He looked at Frank over his glasses. To fight this, you need the official, certified plat map and the original deed of easement as filed with the county. Those are the only documents that matter in a court of law. A wave of relief washed over Frank. For the first time, he felt like he had an ally who spoke the enemy's language. "I will retrieve them for you," Mr. Chen said. "It will take a day or two. In the meantime, you must counter their procedural attack with one of your own." He slid a piece of paper across his desk. Under state law, as a homeowner in good standing, you have the right to inspect the association's records. This is a formal request template. You will ask for the minutes of all board meetings for the past 2 years, all financial statements, and all correspondence related to new development proposals in or adjacent to Oakwood Estates. Send it certified mail to Prestige Community Management. They are legally required to respond. Frank followed Mr. Chen's instructions to the letter. 2 days later, Mr. Chen called. He sounded different. There was a new energy in his quiet voice. "Mr. Morrison, I have the documents. Could you come to my office?" When Frank arrived, Mr. Chen had 2 large documents spread across his desk under a bright lamp. The first was the official plat map of Oakwood Estates, Subdivision Phase 2, stamped and certified by the county recorder. The lines were crisp, the measurements exact. Mr. Chen pointed to Lot 47 Frank's property. "As you can see, your property line is precisely where your own survey indicated," he said. "The 10-foot strip of land in question is unequivocally part of your private lot. There is no ambiguity." He then pointed to the second document, the original deed of easement. "And this," he said, "is the smoking gun." He traced a line on the document with his finger. "This is the only view corridor easement on record for this section of the subdivision. It is a utility easement, 5 feet wide, running along the rear of your property, for access to the electrical transformer. It has nothing to do with the eastern side of your lot, where the garden is located. The HOA's claim of a common area view corridor easement on that side of your property is a complete fabrication. It does not exist." Frank stared at the map, at the clear, undeniable lines, and felt a cold, hard anger solidify in his gut. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding based on a blurry map. This was a deliberate, calculated lie. The mystery was no longer about whether he was right. The plat map proved he was. The new mystery, the far more dangerous one, was why. Why would the board of directors, led by Karen Mitchell, invent a non-existent easement and use it to systematically persecute him, threatening his home with fines and a lien? The answer, or at least a clue, arrived in a large manila envelope from Prestige Community Management a few days later. It was their response to his request for records. Inside were dozens of pages of board meeting minutes and financial reports. But as Frank flipped through them, he saw that entire sections had been crudely blacked out with a thick marker. Paragraph after paragraph, page after page. Any mention of agenda items titled New Development Proposals, Zoning Inquiries, or Oak Valley Partners was completely redacted. They weren't just lying to him. They were actively hiding something from the entire community. And whatever it was connected to his small strip of land, the same piece of land that held the last beautiful thing he and Martha had ever built together. He held the redacted pages in his hand, the black bars a testament to their deception. He now had the truth about his property line. His next mission was to uncover the truth they were so desperate to conceal. Armed with the certified plat map, Frank felt a surge of confidence. He believed the truth was a powerful enough weapon to end this. He was wrong. He scheduled a meeting with Karen, presenting the official map and the easement deed in the same sterile office as before. He expected, if not an apology, at least a retreat. Instead, Karen examined the documents with a dismissive air, as if they were minor inconveniences. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Mr. Morrison," she said, her voice smooth as polished stone. "We will have our legal counsel review these documents in due course. However, until we receive their official opinion, the board's decision stands. The fines will continue to accrue." It was a stunning display of arrogance. She was staring at incontrovertible proof of her deception and doubling down. Frank left the meeting realizing that facts didn't matter to her. This was about power. As he walked out, he saw her through the office window, getting into her car and driving not toward Oakwood Estates, but toward a small cafe on the other side of town. On a hunch, he followed. He watched from his own car as Karen met a man in an expensive suit. They spoke for nearly an hour, hunched over architectural drawings spread on their table. The man's bearing was confident, predatory. Frank saw him slide a thick envelope across the table to Karen, which she discreetly placed in her handbag. The man, Frank would later learn from a photo Sarah identified, was Mark Stetler, a senior partner at Oak Valley Development. The pieces were clicking into place, the lies, the redacted minutes, the secret meetings, but he still needed the final, damning link. His answer came in the mail 2 days later. Another certified letter. This one was thicker, printed on heavy legal bond. Notice of intent to place. Lie-in. The words seemed to leap off the page. The outstanding balance of fines had now ballooned to over $2,000. The letter stated that if the full amount was not paid and the violation not cured within 15 days, the association's attorneys would file a lien against his property at 1214 Chestnut Lane. A lien was the first step toward foreclosure. They were threatening to take his home. The sheer audacity of it left him breathless. They were attempting to seize his property based on a fraudulent claim, and were using the very mechanisms of the HOA to do it legally. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at the edges of his composure. He immediately called Mr. Chen, his voice tight with urgency. "They're trying to put a lien on my house." "This is a common tactic," Mr. Chen said, his calm voice a steadying anchor. "They are escalating to force you to fold. Do not panic. We will escalate as well." Mr. Chen explained that the redacted documents were a violation of state transparency laws. He knew a paralegal, a friend who specialized in corporate record retrieval, who might be able to find unredacted versions through other channels. As they waited, Sarah's community intelligence network delivered another crucial piece of the puzzle. "The annual homeowners meeting is next Wednesday," she told him, her eyes wide. "It's the one meeting a year the board can't completely control. There's an open forum, and by law, they have to let any homeowner speak. It's your last chance to take your case directly to the community, before that lien gets filed." The timeline was now brutally clear. He had 1 week. 1 week to find the unredacted truth and prepare for the most important 3-minute speech of his life. The day before the meeting, Mr. Chen called. "I have it," he said. His paralegal friend had found a loophole. The developer, Oak Valley Partners, had been required to submit their communications with the HOA as part of a preliminary zoning application with the city. Those records were a matter of public record. They weren't redacted. Frank sat in Mr. Chen's study and read the unredacted emails between Karen Mitchell and Mark Stetler. The words painted a picture of calculated corruption that made him physically ill. Oak Valley Development was planning a luxury retail center on the land bordering the subdivision, but their primary access route was blocked by a small wetland preserve. Their secondary option required a new access road. That road needed to cut directly through the non-existent view corridor easement on Frank's property. In exchange for securing that land for the developer, Karen Mitchell was to receive a consulting fee of $50,000, the exact amount needed to save her own home from a quiet foreclosure she was facing after a disastrous divorce. The emails detailed the entire strategy: invent an easement, create a violation, levy fines, and apply pressure until the grieving elderly veteran either gave up the land or was forced out by a lien. His personal tragedy had been, to them, a business opportunity. He now had it all: the plat map, the redacted minutes, and the unredacted emails proving the motive. He had the truth. Now, he had to deploy it. The community clubhouse buzzed with the low murmur of 150 homeowners. It was the largest turnout for an annual meeting in years, a testament to the whispers and rumors that had circulated throughout Oakwood Estates in the preceding weeks. At the front of the room, Karen Mitchell sat at the center of the board table, looking poised and confident, a queen presiding over her court. Beside the lectern, a large projector screen displayed the meeting agenda. A digital countdown timer was projected in the top right corner, a stark reminder of the rigid control she maintained. Frank sat in the front row, a USB drive clutched in his hand. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of anxiety and resolve. He was not a public speaker. He was a soldier, a man of action, not words. But tonight, words were his only weapons. The meeting droned on through the treasurer's report and the landscaping committee update. Finally, Karen announced, "We will now move to the open forum. As a reminder, each speaker will be limited to 5 minutes to ensure we can adjourn on time. The timer will be visible on the screen." Frank was the first to the lectern. He took a deep breath, plugged the USB drive into the provided laptop, and watched as his presentation loaded onto the massive screen behind Karen. The timer began its relentless countdown: 500, 4, 59, 4, 58. "Good evening," he began, his voice steadier than he expected. "My name is Frank Morrison, 1214, Chestnut Lane. Many of you are aware that the board has been fining me for an alleged encroachment on a common area easement." He clicked the remote. Slide 1 appeared on the screen, a high-resolution scan of the formal violation notice, with CC&R, Figure 8.4.2, circled in red. "This is the violation notice I received," he said. "It claims the memorial garden for my late wife sits on a common area view corridor easement." He clicked again. Slide 2 showed the blurry, indecipherable map Karen had presented at his hearing. "This is the map the board used as their sole piece of evidence to justify thousands of dollars in fines and to threaten my home with a lien." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. For weeks, I was led to believe this was a legitimate document, but I knew the garden was on my land. So I went to the county recorder's office. He clicked the remote. The blurry map was replaced by slide 3, the crystal clear, certified plat map from the county. He used a laser pointer to trace the boundary of his lot. The red line of the pointer fell a full 5 feet beyond Martha's garden wall. "This," he declared, his voice ringing with authority, "is the legally binding plat map for our subdivision. It is not a copy. It is a certified public record. And as you can plainly see, the land is mine. There is no common area easement where the board claims." An audible gasp went through the room. Heads turned toward the board table. Karen's smile was gone, replaced by a mask of rigid fury. Her knuckles were white on her gavel. "So the question is," Frank continued, his eyes locked on Karen, "why would the board lie? Why invent a non-existent easement to harass a resident?" He clicked the remote. Slide 4 showed the heavily redacted meeting minutes he had received. Black bars covered entire sections. Perhaps the answer is in the documents they tried to hide from us. When I requested the board minutes concerning new development proposals, this is what I received. The timer on the screen showed 2:30. But public records requests are a powerful tool. He clicked again. Slide 5 showed the unredacted minutes. The black bars gone. Highlighted in yellow were records of multiple secret executive sessions between Karen Mitchell and representatives from a company called Oak Valley Development. The room was now utterly silent. The only sound was the quiet hum of the projector. And what were they discussing in these secret meetings? Frank's voice dropped, becoming grave. They were discussing a proposal for a new commercial access road. He clicked to slide 6, an email from Mark Stetler of Oak Valley to Karen. It contained a map, a thick red line, labeled Proposed Access Road, cut directly through Frank's property, right where Martha's garden stood. They needed my land, and to get it, they invented a violation to force me out. The timer showed 1:05. He had one last slide. It was the most damning of all. As he prepared to click, his eyes swept the crowd and landed on Sarah. She was watching him, her face a mixture of pride and fear. In his notes was a final point, a mention of her garden shed, which had stood unapproved for 3 years, without so much as a warning letter from Karen. It was the perfect, textbook example of the selective enforcement he needed to prove Karen's malicious intent beyond any doubt. It would cement his victory. But it would also expose his friend, his first and staunchest ally, to the same vicious bureaucratic machinery he was fighting. It would drag her into the mud, make her a target. For a split second, he faced a choice: use every weapon at his disposal to guarantee his own victory, or protect the person who had stood by him. The timer ticked past the 1-minute mark. He looked from Sarah back to the smug, hateful face of Karen Mitchell. And he made his decision. He would win on the merits of his own case, not by sacrificing an innocent. He skipped the note about Sarah. He clicked to his final slide. Slide 7. It was an email from Karen to the developer. It read, "The $50,000 consulting fee is acceptable. I can guarantee the easement will be cleared and available for your access road within 90 days. The homeowner is elderly and recently widowed. He will not have the resources to fight a lien." The timer showed 0:15. Frank Morrison looked out at his stunned neighbors, his voice filled with a quiet, righteous anger. This was never about a garden wall. This was about greed. This was a conspiracy to commit fraud, to steal my property for personal financial gain, disguised as HOA business. The timer hit 0:00. Frank lowered the remote. "My time is up." For a moment, there was a stunned silence. Then, the room erupted. The sound was not just chatter. It was a wave of collective outrage. Homeowners were on their feet, shouting questions, pointing fingers at the board table. Karen Mitchell, her face ashen, repeatedly banged her gavel. But the sound was lost in the tumult. "Order, this forum is closed," she yelled, her voice thin and reedy against the roar. From the back of the room, a clear, strong voice cut through the chaos. It was Mrs. Gable, an elderly woman who was one of the original owners in the subdivision. She stood, frail but resolute. "A point of order, Madam President." The room quieted slightly, all eyes turning to her. According to the bylaws, Article 4, Section 3, Mrs. Gable announced, her voice surprisingly powerful, "Any homeowner may make a motion from the floor during the annual meeting. I move that the board's executive authority be immediately frozen pending a full, independent forensic audit of all board activities, finances, and correspondence for the past 2 years.
Second, yelled a man near the front.
The uproar was instantaneous and overwhelming. Karen tried to rule the motion out of order, but it was too late. The community had taken control. The motion was called to a vote, and a forest of hands shot into the air. It passed with a thunderous aye. Frank watched as the developer, Mark Stetler, who had been sitting quietly in the back, slipped out a side door. Tim, the young representative from Prestige Community Management, looked pale, sweat beading on his forehead as he furiously typed on his laptop, no doubt documenting his company's role in the impending legal firestorm. The fragile construct of Karen's authority had fractured, shattering under the weight of a single, certified plat map. In the weeks that followed, the audit confirmed everything Frank had uncovered, and more. It revealed a pattern of financial mismanagement, self-dealing, and a slush fund Karen had used for personal legal fees. Faced with the overwhelming evidence and the threat of a lawsuit from the association itself, Karen Mitchell and her 2 allies on the board resigned in disgrace. A special election was held to form a new, transparent board. To his own surprise, Frank was nominated and elected as its new president. His first act was to formally and publicly rescind the violation, the fines, and the intent to lien against his own property. The motion passing with a unanimous vote and a round of applause. His second act was more profound. While reviewing the old board's records now fully unredacted, he found the developer's original, unabridged proposal. His eyes widened as he saw the full scope of the plan. The access road that was to cut through his garden was only Phase 1. Phase 2 would have required seizing an additional 20-foot strip of land to widen the road for commercial truck access. That land belonged to his neighbor, Mrs. Gable. Her fixed income and frail health would have made it impossible for her to fight a protracted legal battle against a wealthy developer and a corrupt HOA. He sat back in his chair, a slow realization dawning on him. By fighting to protect Martha's memory, by defending that small, sacred patch of ground, he had unknowingly saved his elderly neighbor's home. At the next board meeting, Frank Morrison, the man who had been publicly humiliated in this very room just 2 months prior, stood at the president's podium. He looked out at his neighbors, Sarah, Mr. Chen, Mrs. Gable, and all the others who had found their voice. "Our governing documents should be a shield to protect our community," he said, "not a sword to attack our residents. To ensure what happened to me and what almost happened to Mrs. Gable never happens again, I propose the creation of a community legal defense fund, to be funded by a one-time special assessment. This fund will provide grants to any homeowner who needs to hire legal counsel to challenge an unjust action by this board, or any future board." The motion passed unanimously. Later that evening, Frank walked out to his garden. The evening air was cool, the pink roses luminous in the twilight. He ran his hand over the sturdy stone of the retaining wall, a structure that had withstood a siege. He had not just saved a garden. He had saved a home. He had saved a community. And in doing so, he had finally found a new mission, a new way to stand watch, protecting the legacy of the woman he loved by protecting the neighborhood they had chosen together.